Hello, I'm Mark Hirsch from Carolinas Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. My presentation is entitled Allied Health in Rehabilitation of People with Parkinson's Disease. And I think a talk on allied health is very appropriate for our conference because historically allied health has been a vital adjunct to the management of people with Parkinson's disease. As you can see from my title slide, I'd like to acknowledge some of my funding, the Park Foundation, the Leon Levine Foundation, the Atrium Health Foundation of my hospital, and also the Duke Endowment for funding the research that I do on patient engagement and allied health interventions for people with Parkinson's disease. And in the picture you can see in the background Charlotte, North Carolina. We're in the south of the United States, southeastern part of the United States. And at the bottom you can see a rendition of, or a picture of, our medical center. We're actually in 3 states, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, and we employ over 50,000 healthcare professionals and have a large rehabilitation hospital and Parkinson's program. The topic of my talk is allied health, and one definition of allied health is a group of medically prescribed healthcare services such as occupational therapy, speech pathology, physical therapy provided by licensed professionals. I'm going to cover 3 key issues in my talk, and these are my take-home points as well. The first is I'm going to discuss the organization of allied healthcare, and I'm going to talk about the fact that as a specialty, as an allied healthcare specialty, we're quite fragmented, and what we offer to our patients is nowhere near standardized. The second point I'm going to make is the role of the patient and the caregiver in providing allied health care services as partners or colleagues in providing those services. I will briefly discuss that there is a lack of patient-provider-scientist collaboration that's keeping us from really shining allied health care provisions in Parkinson's disease. And I'm going to make the argument that we need to collaborate with patients and care partners as partners in care. And the third point I'm going to make is that the utilization, supply, and demand of care are major issues, major challenges for us moving into the middle of the 21st century. We have a serious supply and demand issue in allied healthcare, and it's keeping us from achieving our objectives. So in other words, I'm going to discuss how to organize allied healthcare, how to involve patients or care partners as partners in care. I'd like you to think about how to break the mold of what allied health care for Parkinson's disease looks like. Don't let anyone in the medical community tell you how allied health care ought to be organized, because right now, honestly, nobody knows the best answer. We need to have courage and use the best science and our dreams for success. There are 2 points I'd like you to remember during our presentation. The first is that we have a very large amount of interventions that have shown efficacy in Parkinson's disease, non-pharmacologic interventions. All of the studies that you see listed, or interventions that you see listed here, are supported by at least one meta-analysis. So we have a lot of tools in our toolbox that we can use in our allied healthcare treatments. The other thing I'd like you to remember is that early access to allied healthcare is vital. We need to get patients in at an early stage of Parkinson's disease and not wait for them to reach moderate to late stages of Parkinson's disease, obviously. And the reason this is so important is that we have learned that self-produced activity, and specifically exercise and physical therapy, affect the brain both on a structural and on a metabolic level. And the evidence in animal studies suggests that exercise is neuroprotective and neurorestorative in Parkinson's models of exercise. And in human studies, these results are being paralleled by very similar effects. So it is really important that we get patients into rehabilitation, into allied healthcare interventions as early as possible. And we don't lose any patients. We want to keep them in our allied healthcare circles for the long run. Now, I'd like to take just a second to look at the traditional allied healthcare participants. And if we go back to the 1980s, we can see that the neurologists would provide most of the care to the patient and to their care partner and family members. And we would see that the main actors in allied healthcare are the speech, occupational, physical therapist, the PD nurse specialist, the social worker, and perhaps the neurosurgeon. So this is the picture perhaps in the 1980s. Moving forward to 2012, this is a schematic prepared by Niekake and Kois, my Dutch colleagues. We can already see that there are many more allied health care individuals involved in the care of people with Parkinson's disease. We have home care, we have a dietitian, neuropsychologist, a fitness professional, a pharmacist, and believe it or not, most or many rehabilitation professionals would not consider the pharmacist as a member of the team, but that person is actually vital to working with the patient and recommending the best types of dosages and to reinforce and educate the patient on medication intake. And also the fitness professional really was not a part of allied healthcare care in the 1990s and early 2000s because it was believed that fitness training, physical activity, and exercise was a waste of time for people with Parkinson's disease. So there's really no sense in engaging them and educating them and including them in the allied healthcare team. But that changed in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2010. And really now the fitness professional is seen as an integral member of the allied healthcare team. In fact, most or many neurologists will refer their patients into an exercise program at diagnosis. Now the picture changes drastically in 2021. We recognize today that all of these subspecialists and allied healthcare members are part of the team. No team should be without a GI specialist because of the relationship between gut health and brain health. Palliative care, social worker, the physiatrist, the rehab medicine specialist, the scientist ought to be a part of the allied healthcare team. The clinical geriatrician, the sexologist, industry sponsors, the Parkinson's Association representative, the PD Expert Center, and one that isn't on there is the vocational rehabilitation specialist. All of these individuals are providing services for people with Parkinson's disease that are vital to maintain quality of life. However, the problem you can see is that this is a very complex system with many different entities involved, with different levels of expertise, different knowledge of Parkinson's disease, and we all need to bring them to a level where we can work together and help the patient as much as possible. In 2011, really important paper was published on multidisciplinary care for Parkinson's disease. And essentially, one of the important points they made was that there's very little research on multidisciplinary care in Parkinson's disease. How do all of these actors work together, and which ones are important and which ones are less important? It's clear that multidisciplinary care in PD is important, but it's not clear what combination of allied healthcare professionals are important for outcomes. So that is still an area that needs a lot of research. We also have a supply and demand issue, not just in the United States, but worldwide, I would say. And in the US, the US is experiencing this problem. And this slide shows that there's a far greater demand for neurology services than there is a supply of neurologists. So that's an issue. This is paralleled by shortages of allied healthcare professionals, including physical therapists and nurses, and increasing demands for Parkinson's disease therapy. And this is driven by the aging of our population. PD is the fastest growing neurodegenerative condition in the world. And it is projected that shortages of physical therapists in the United States will exceed 140,000 in the next 10 years, particularly in skilled nursing facilities, outpatient physical therapy, and acute care hospitals. A few years back, Fullard examined rehabilitation therapy utilization for Parkinson's disease. They identified 175,000 Medicare beneficiaries with a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease in 2007 and followed them through 2009. The main outcome measure of interest were the annual receipt of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. And what you can see on this slide is that outpatient rehabilitation fee for service was low. In 2007, only 14.2% of individuals with Parkinson's disease had claims for PT or OT, 14.6% for speech. Asian Americans were the highest users of PT or OT at 18.4%, and speech therapy at 18.4%, followed by Caucasians, and African Americans had the lowest utilization of PT, OT, or speech at around 8%. This is important because a large proportion of people with Parkinson's disease are of African American descent. This is also a global problem. Many people with Parkinson's are not getting the allied health care that they need, or the care that they need. In wealthy countries, we find that 40% of people 65 and older do not see a neurologist. Among people with neurological disorders, African Americans are about 30% less likely, and Hispanics 40% less likely to see a neurologist in an office. African Americans are 4 times less likely to receive any Parkinson's treatment and less likely to undergo deep brain stimulation surgery. And only 7 to 56% of Parkinson's patients are ever referred into physical therapy. Another issue is trust in public trust in people running various institutions. And you can see that from this National Science Foundation schematic that public trust has in medicine, science, companies, and people and the press has decreased since the 1970s. It was never very high in science. It was always around 40%, and it hasn't decreased very much. It has gone down in medicine, and these effects can still be seen in 2020 in the wake of the COVID pandemic. So that's an issue because trust underlies every interaction with your allied healthcare professional. If you don't trust your allied healthcare professional, how can they help you? So we need to work on interventions to build trust. As I said earlier, patients need timely access to healthcare. In our own research, we used elements of the Dutch Parkinson Net, and this was developed in socialized medicine in Holland, and we built a regionalized interprofessional Parkinson network in the catchment area of Carolinas Medical Center. In Mecklenburg County, you can see where most of those blue dots are and the purple YMCA dots. So the Mecklenburg area is roughly 1.1 million people in 1,400 square kilometers. It's about 3 times the size of the Netherlands. And we developed our regionalized Parkinson network called Renew Research and Education in Neurowellness, and held a 3-day training workshop for nurses, physical therapists, OTs, neurologists, and patients and caregivers who were in attendance. All of those received the training under one roof at the same time to increase expertise, communication, and trust. When we evaluated the workshop, the overall impression was 94% said it was an excellent workshop. And you can see for yourself, most of the evaluation is glowing and very supportive of a workshop under one roof, which is not really how we do allied healthcare education traditionally. These efforts are done for each allied healthcare specialty alone. And our thought was by doing them together, we would improve communication and we would improve the handoff from one allied healthcare professional to the next. And that's exactly what happened. So what would the future of allied healthcare possibly look like? So in this study, what you can see a picture of 2 individuals. They both have Parkinson's disease and they're co-administering a treatment. This was part of a randomized controlled trial of high intensity resistance and balance training effect on postural control in Parkinson's disease conducted in the early 90s. It wasn't meant to be that the interventionists in the study were care partners and patients, but that's how it turns out. And the intervention it's one of the most highly cited papers in Parkinson's disease and rehabilitation. What I want to draw your attention to is the schematic on the right. And again, we had to wait until 2020 for the meta-analyses to come out and to show us that the effects that we're seeing with the patient-administered treatment and interventions is as good as, if not better than, interventions that were provided by highly trained allied healthcare professionals, including physical therapists and fitness trainers. Given our supply and demand problem, I think this shows that this kind of an intervention is feasible in this kind of a setting. Recently, a paper appeared. This is an important paper on global variation in deep brain stimulation practices for Parkinson's disease. Mahan et al. Found low reliance on multidisciplinary teams for cognitive mood assessments. They assessed DBS specialists in around the world globally, and they found that only in about 40% of centers the decision on how to select patients for DBS was made by a multidisciplinary team. There were very few social workers, as you can see by the lower arrow, and very few neuropsychologists really involved in selecting these patients, and I think that's a missed opportunity. We need to focus more on movement disorders and also focus on social and cognitive aspects. And as you can see, again, the utilization of PT for PD is quite low. It's variable between 7 and 38% in the UK and 48 to 62% in Holland. But even in the UK, that means that up to 93% of patients do not participate in physical therapy. So this is a big problem. And I think that I say this tongue in cheek, but patients are getting better and better at administering treatments, and they're better and better able to participate in allied health care as engaged health coaches. And I think that if we're not careful, many of us are going to be out of a job because the patients are doing it as well as the highly trained professionals. So a challenge is to get patients involved in the allied healthcare process. And I want to give a last example, and that is from a very well-known scientist in the field, Sara Rigara. Ms. Rigara was 32 when she had Parkinson's disease diagnosed in June of 2003. But as she says, I had known that something was wrong for almost 18 years. I experienced the first symptoms in my teens, and a few years later was diagnosed as having generalized dystonia. We asked Sarah, what is the value of allied healthcare in Parkinson's disease care? What do you think are the top key research or clinical gaps in allied healthcare for people living with PD? What should be the role of the patient as health coach or co-therapist and care partner as key members of the allied healthcare team of people with Parkinson's disease? Sarah told us that self-care for Parkinson's disease includes managing the full complexity and unpredictability of Parkinson's disease by, for example, learning about available pharmacological and non-pharmacological treatments, symptoms, side effects, how to find and assess medical information, tools and methods for observing and registering symptoms, medication intakes, and other observations, as well as keeping physically and mentally active. In other words, a patient is someone who's empowered to be a full partner of the allied healthcare team, but they need allied healthcare research training in order to be a full partner. This could involve didactic lecture series, participation in journal clubs, readers and writers of guidelines of physical therapy for Parkinson's disease, reviewing and writing research proposals. And there are already patient reviewers active on the Department of Defense CDMRP Parkinson Research Program grant applications, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation also employs patient reviewers on all of their research grants. Rigara is well known for her forward-thinking concept of patients who organize and train doctors to provide better care. And I want to end with a few words about a study, a recent study by Bosblum and colleagues that showed that care in the home using a stationary cycle to improve aerobic capacity can also affect physical function by reducing or by slowing down the progression of Parkinson's disease, possibly. This was evidenced by a less drop in the UPDRS score from pre to post training in the intervention group as compared to a group that received stretching in the home. And this study was run with remote supervision. So the patient was actually exercising on their own in the home with minimal supervision. Again, a great model for allied healthcare. I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I want to again acknowledge all the allied healthcare individuals that I work with at Carolinas Medical Center and internationally. And the numbers, the colors in red show all of the engaged Parkinson patients that I work with on the front end of my grants, and who also assist us through the Community Advisory Board to run our studies. Thank you very much.